Praise the one
who gave the growth with voices full and strong.
When God brought Zion's captives home, it seemed to us like a dream.
But then our mouths were full of laughter, and our tongues uttered shouts of joy.
Then they said among the nations, God has done great things for them.
Truly God has done great things for us.
Therefore we rejoice.
We praise the ones who gave the growth with voices full and strong.
Restore our fortunes, O God, as streams refresh the Negev.
Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy.
Those who go out weeping, carrying seed for sowing,
Shall come home with songs of joy,
Bringing in their sheaves.
We praise the one who gave the growth with voices full and strong.
Okay, Thanksgiving. There's a story about a minister who always seemed to find something positive to say. Didn't matter how things were going, he always found something positive in a situation. But there was one week in this small town where they lived where just everything went wrong. Big hailstorm came through and wiped out the crops for miles around. The only industry in town, which is a manufacturing plant, announced it was closing its doors. Everybody was thrown out of work. There was an accident where a couple of teenage kids were hurt, and like everything you can imagine went wrong. And people came to church that Sunday, and the cynics in the back, because the cynics always sit in the back. Yeah, there they are. You know who you are. We're wondering, like, all right, what's he going to find to be thankful for this week? And the minister came into the church and he put his arms out and he said, "Oh God, we are thankful before you today. Things aren't always this bad." And that's the kind of spirit we find in Psalm 126. Things are bad right now, but you know, they're going to get better. It's not always like this. Hope springs eternal. Nothing stays the same. The riders aren't always going to lose. We live in next year country. And the poetry of the psalm, to get this idea across, is wonderfully evocative. We're not sure of the circumstances when it was written, but we know that things were bad at that time. And the first half of the psalm mentions the last time things were this bad and remembers that they got better then too. It was the end of the Babylonian exile, when the people were allowed to come home. It seemed to us like a dream, the author remembers. Our mouths were full of laughter, and our tongues uttered shouts of joy. Wow. I'm sure we've all experienced a kind of a homecoming like that. Maybe even you're having one this weekend. A time when it was such a happy event that you felt like pinching yourself to make sure it wasn't a dream. Don't let yourself forget about those happy times. Hang on to them and give thanks for them. And you think, well, of course I remember all the good times. But you know, when things aren't going well, when your life is swirling because it's just about to go down get flushed, it's really easy, actually, to remember those good things. It takes a little bit of work to remember them. Don't lose sight. The author of Psalm 126 doesn't forget. Restore our fortunes, O God, as streams refresh the Negev. Now, the Negev, of course, is a desert in the southern and south of Israel. It looks something like this. This is the Negev. You can see that there's a dry riverbed, a wadi running through it. And when it rains in the hills, the dry riverbeds fill with water, just like you can see here. Sudden, sometimes dangerous flood of water. Restore our prosperity, O God, the way rain gives life to a drought-stricken land. And then, in conclusion of the psalm, an image of what such a restoration might look like, and it's a farming image. Those who sow in tears shall reap with shouts of joy. Well, why would one sow in tears? Seeding time isn't a time of grief. It's a time of excitement. Sometimes it's uncertain, yes, I grant, but not a time of grief. Why would one sow in tears? Well, I think we have to imagine a farmer of 2,500 years ago. He and his family living a hard-scrabble life in a harsh and arid land. He has taxes to pay and mouths to feed, and the remains of last year's crop, one small bag of grain. And early one morning, he takes that bag of grain and stands where he has hoed up a small plot of dry land. He can feed his family with that bag of grain, or he can put it in the ground and hope for the best. There isn't a rain cloud to be seen. He closes his eyes, he says a prayer. He takes a breath and he steps forward, scattering the precious seed on the ground. And as those grains fall to earth, so too do the tears from his eyes. Yes, I can imagine that one would sow in tears. But things don't always stay the same. Sometimes it does rain. It wasn't that long ago that the Riders did win the cup. Remember that? The Blue Jays are in the playoffs. They might not be in the playoffs for very long, but they're in the playoffs. The Chicago Cubs are winning. Things don't always stay the same. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed for sowing, shall come home with songs of joy, bringing in their sheaves. Songs of joy, bringing in their sheaves. And yes, if you're wondering, that is the source of that old hymn, bringing in the sheaves, we shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. Sorry. Better when the band sings. But I'd like to tell you this morning about another hymn. And you may know this story, but it's worth hearing again. This is a hymn that was written by a man named Martin Rinckart. There he is. He was a Lutheran pastor who served in Eilenburg, Germany during the whole of the 30 Years' War, which was in the early 1600s. It was actually a series of wars, one of the worst wars in all of history. It involved most of Europe and dragged on for so long that many of the countries involved went bankrupt. They could no longer pay their armies, and so they instructed their soldiers to take their pay by pillaging the civilian population. It was ghastly. Now, Eilenburg, where Martin was a walled city, and the people flocked to it for protection. And of course, there they were underfed and overcrowded. And predictably, a horrible disease, an infectious disease, broke out, almost a plague, and they began to die. There were 4 Lutheran ministers there at that time. One of them just ran away. The other 2 died of the plague, and Martin Rinckart was left to do their 2 funerals. He also did his wife's funeral. And people began to die so rapidly that he was doing as many as 40 funerals a day. By his own records, 4,480 funerals in a little over a year. Can you imagine? And in the midst of this, in the midst of war and pestilence and his own grief, he wrote a hymn. I'd like to read the first verse for you so that we can be reminded that sowing in tears and reaping with songs of joy aren't always separated by a long growing season. Sometimes they happen at the same time. Martin Rinckart. Now, thank we all our God with hands and hearts and voices, who wondrous things has done, and in whom this world rejoices, who from our mother's arms has led us on our way with countless gifts of love and still is ours today. When I think what was going on in Martin Rinkhart's life when he wrote those words, it just takes my breath away. Now, I love Thanksgiving weekend. Partly it's the weather. Fall is definitely my favorite season of the year. And partly it's all that good food. Little apple pie doesn't hurt. And partly it's that I've got so much to be thankful for in my life. But you know, we can't wait for Thanksgiving weekend to be thankful. Thanksgiving can't wait until we can reap with songs of joy. Thanksgiving can't wait until the end of the 30 Years' War. Thanksgiving can't wait until everything is wonderful. Thanksgiving is too important for that. Thanksgiving is a great response for the good things in our life. Yes, it's all of that. But Thanksgiving is also a thanks for the things that haven't happened yet. Thanksgiving is not just a response, it's a pre-sponse to the good things. As Brian alluded to, researchers tell us that the practice of gratitude is one of the key elements of happiness. Gratitude increases positive emotions, it reduces the risk of depression, it benefits relationships, and increases our resilience. I love that phrase. It increases our resilience when bad things happen. Gratitude reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and helps us to sleep better. Thanksgiving is kind of a happiness pill, if you can imagine that. Thanksgiving is an antidote for the poisons of bitterness and discouragement. Thanksgiving is an antibiotic for the infections of arrogance and self-righteousness and that unseemly self-satisfaction we call pride. Thanksgiving keeps us humble and makes us happy. So it's kind of like the difference between cat theology and dog theology. Do you know about that? Dog theology goes like this. You feed me, you shelter me, you pet me, you love me, you must be God. And cat theology goes like this. You feed me, you shelter me, you pet me, you love me, I must be God. Some of you have had cats. Thanksgiving keeps us humble and makes us happy. Thanksgiving is not a big meal, it's a big deal. Thanksgiving is not a weekend, it's an attitude. It's not a day off, it's a daily practice. I see Thanksgiving when I go to the hospital. And there'll be some patient with the tubes and the wires coming out of them, and they'll tell me how thankful they are. They'll tell me how fortunate they are. They'll tell me how much better off they are than the person in the next bed or the one across the hall. And they're not just saying what they think the minister wants to hear. They really mean it. They are people for whom Thanksgiving has become a way of life. People who always seem to find something good in every situation. People for whom Thanksgiving has become Thankssliving. It's a church gathering, one of those where all people sit in a circle and they were all asked to say something they were thankful for. And it was, I'm thankful for family and good health. And one person said, I'm thankful that I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I'm thankful. Thankssliving seems to come naturally to some people. I'm fortunate to have a pretty positive outlook on life. I've never had to work very hard at being thankful. And yes, I am thankful for that. But thankfulness can also be learned. It's a practice. And practice makes perfect. The most life-changing prayer I know is one you say in bed before you go to sleep. And it starts, God, I'm thankful for, and it ends, Amen. And in the middle, you list and name the good things that happened to you that day. That builds the practice of thanksgiving. That turns an occasional thanksgiving into a daily thanks-living. We count calories, we count shopping days till Christmas, we count spare change, we count our retirement incomes. Let's not forget to count blessings as well. And this Thanksgiving, I'm going to be particularly thankful for mashed potatoes. I'm usually especially thankful for stuffing, but this year, mashed potatoes, because I just finished reading the book The Martian by Andy Weir. You probably, maybe you've seen the movie already with Matt Damon, I don't know. But the story, and I won't be giving away too much, I don't think, he's stranded on Mars, and instead of it being like Swiss Family Robinson or Castaway with Tom Hanks, Wilson, instead of being stranded on a lush tropical island, he's stranded on Mars. And he figures out he hasn't got enough food to last. But fortunately, he was going to be there, the whole crew was going to be there over Thanksgiving. And so NASA couldn't send a turkey along, but they did send along a dozen potatoes. They were going to cook them in a little microwave for their Thanksgiving dinner. So he's got a dozen potatoes, and he decides he better grow up a crop of potatoes if he's going to survive. So he brings in a bunch of Martian soil from outside into this habitat where he's living. Now, Debbie and I have planted potatoes for years. We didn't this year for the first time in a long time, but we've grown potatoes. I know how easy it is to grow potatoes. You dig a hole in the ground, you stick a potato in it, and you go away. More or less. Well, I go away, and then Debbie does all the rest of the work. All right. But Matt Damon, Mark Watney, the character in the book, can't do that because there's nothing in that soil to make anything grow. Our soil here is full of trillions of living things, bacteria and all kinds of living things that do all that stuff that good soil does. So he's got to fertilize this ground somehow. He uses his own body wastes, night soil is the polite word. And he's got to colonize the soil with bacteria, again, from his body wastes. And so he mixes that all up, and then he's got to water it. It's powder dry. When we plant potatoes, either the water falls out of the sky or it comes out of the river through a hose or something. It's easy, but it's not easy. He actually practically kills himself trying to make water by mixing hydrogen and oxygen. It's a great book. I haven't seen the movie yet, although I understand it's pretty good. I highly recommend the book. But it's just reminded me this year how thankful I am for mashed potatoes. And it seems so often it's those simple things that are the most wondrous if we would only stop to enjoy them. And for that, and for all of our blessings, we give thanks to God. Amen. And may that be the blessing of our lives as we go from this place to enjoy this weekend, that the river of God's blessings may flow through our lives, and we may give thanks. Now, go, and as you go, may the grace and peace of God go with you all. Amen.
I didn't have no doubt when I rose this morning. I didn't have no doubt when I rose this morning. I didn't have no doubt. I didn't have no doubt in my mind. When I rose this morning, I didn't have no doubt. I didn't have no doubt. When I rose this morning, I didn't have no doubt. I didn't have no doubt in my mind. When I rose this morning, I didn't have no doubt. Didn't have no doubt. When I rose this morning, I didn't have no doubt. I didn't have no doubt. have no doubt. I didn't have no doubt in my mind.